This is Gamer Weekly, bringing you the latest of what the video game scene has to offer. On today's episode of Gamer Weekly, I have Rodrigue from Thunder Lotus Games, and we'll be talking about their latest game, Sundered. All right, and welcome to another episode of Gamer Weekly, and with me today is Rodrigue from Thunder Lotus Games. Thank you so much for coming back and doing this again.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So we've done this interview before, but my audio got messed up, and you know what? Speaking of which, I almost forgot to turn on the backup. So thank you so much for rescheduling with us and getting back to me quickly. It was much appreciated. So
my pleasure.
So what has changed since the last time that you and I have talked? So I guess how did Jotun go, and because you just said before we started, you said you were at PSX. So how did that go with Sundered as well?
Okay, well, first of all, Jotun has been out on console since September, right? So, the first run is basically done. We're out on all the platforms, and at this point, it's just a series of, sales going on all the platforms going forward. So it's just maintaining a healthy amount of sales on all platforms and trying to keep the social media alive and all that. But the brunt of our efforts as a studio right now are on Sundered, which is our game that's coming out in 2017. So we just came back from PSX in Anaheim, and we were showcasing the first playable build for Sundered there, and it went super well. Our only previous show for Sundered was TwitchCon, and it's sort of like a different. The attendees for those two conferences are pretty different, right? You got a lot of broadcasters, very little media at TwitchCon, and it's kind of the opposite at PSX. You got a lot of media and a lot of just PS4 fans, like people who have Sony in their blood, and they're just pure gamers without any content creation or broadcasting going on. So it was nice to have feedback from that kind of player, and everybody is so positive at that show. Everybody's so stoked to just check out what Sony has to showcase and stuff. So it was my first PSX, our first PSX, and it went really, really well.
And so because they had a big showcase for everything too. So because The Last of Us 2 got announced, and another Uncharted game and other things like that. So
yeah.
How does it feel to be showcased alongside games like that?
Well, it feels great, obviously. I mean, everybody, like I said, is so excited about all the news. And, you got to picture it, though. I mean, the way they have it set up is they have a separate, huge room for the keynote. And we're not in that room, right? While the keynote's happening, we're on the other side, basically tweaking the last setup for the booth before, say, they open up that wall and the people can start streaming in. So we honestly had to wait until the end of the day to watch the keynote. And so for the whole day, when I'm showcasing the new game, I'm asking people what I missed at the keynote. And it's also, that's the other great thing about working these shows is you're just one out of many interesting things that each person who stops at your booth has seen. So I kind of live vicariously through anybody who stops at the booth by asking them what's going on the show floor, right? So it's really, really a cool experience. And like I said, Sony it's basically a curated selection of games they got going on at that show. So we were selected as one of the interesting titles that were coming out in the next year. We were part of the sizzle reel for the keynote, and they also put us up on stage. They were doing interviews with various teams throughout the weekend, and we had a spotlight on us for that as well. It was really, really good.
So, because the first game, Jotun, or is it Jotun? I forgot how we. I guess you can't.
Well, I'll tell you, as we've been corrected several times, many, many times, I should say, since back in our Kickstarter days, it is supposed to be pronounced Jotun or Jotun in Scandinavian. But the main reason we've always said Jotun was basically so that people, say in North America, would know exactly what to Google, right? You want to pronounce that J, so people aren't Googling Yotun or something like that. So it's we're taking creative license to call it Jotun, let's say.
Okay, so because for that game came out on PC first, and then it came out on everything else later.
Correct.
So does being on console kind of feel like you're crossing like the finish line? It's like we finally did it. We made it.
Totally. I mean, if we could have done this differently for Sundered, our goal would have been to release everything at once. I think we were such a young team when we were creating Jotun that it was kind of logistically impossible to try and create all the versions at once. So yeah, it does feel like okay, this project is completely done. We've gotten it into the hands of the most players possible, and we just try and get a few more as time goes on. But the way that sales in games work is that you're basically your first 2-3 weeks, those are the majority of your sales, and then it's a long tail of sales that are going on. So it's even like it's more difficult to try and release it on PC or say on one platform, and then what we did was a whole year later release it on the other platforms. And that was my job as we released that game, is like to try and create some sort of enthusiasm for a game that for a good part of the media was kind of old news at that point because they had covered it a year earlier or even more earlier than that for the Kickstarter and then for the release on PC. And then we're back a year later saying, okay, you want to talk about our game again? And some outlets are just like, well, it's kinda, sorta, but it's not huge news, sort of thing. So that was a big challenge, which I think, considering the good reaction we've seen from console outlets and the sales we've seen on all three consoles, it was we did a good job on that.
For Sundered, though, you guys, it says here that you guys are doing it's another Metroidvania game where like you get that power up or whatever, and you can go in and do another thing. Like, is that something that you guys are going to be doing for like all of your guys' games?
Not necessarily. I mean, we wanted to basically take what we thought worked well with Jotun because we're pretty proud of that project, but we know it wasn't perfect, right? So we wanted to take what worked very well for that game, say the epic boss fights and the immersive world and the hand-drawn art that we do so well. We wanted to take that and put it into a more, say, action-packed sort of game, because what we were trying to do with Jotun was more of an action exploration thing where you had these almost Zen-like sort of exploration moments where there's hardly any action, where you have to pick up runes and find keys to open doors, and then you get to a huge boss fight, which is a huge action-packed segment. But for the rest of the time, it was sort of like a weird balance between contemplative and action-packed. And now we wanted to just do full-on action for the whole game, but keep what I said we were keeping, and then put it on like a side-scrolling sort of thing. Because we grew up with Super Metroid, and say more recently we were super stoked about games like Rogue Legacy, and we wanted to take those influences and sort of color it with all the great stuff that we do well, and put that into a game which we're calling Sundered. So it's not necessarily what we've always done. It's sort of tweaking the formula that we did on our first game, and it's not necessarily what we're looking to do in our next game either.
So what exactly is Sundered about?
Sundered, as we call it, is a horrifying fight for survival and sanity. It's basically, gameplay-wise, a classic Metroidvania game, but we're calling it a replayable Metroidvania. So what you got is that sort of side-scrolling, maze-like exploration gameplay where you're hacking and slashing your way through hordes of enemies. But there's also, say, those power-up systems that you have in classic Metroid games where there are specific powers that you're going to pick up that will allow you to progress into new areas in the game. Say you got certain areas that you can't access until you pick up a power dash, or before you have your power attack, you can't break down certain doors, that sort of thing. So the twist we're putting on it is that we have sort of a corruption mechanic that we have in the game, wherein you're going to have a choice throughout the game that you could take those special powers, but you can also supercharge them to a certain extent by fully co-opting the evil essence of each boss that you defeat. So in the story, you play Esh, and Esh is a lone wanderer in a ruined world, and she's being sucked into these mysterious caverns by a power she doesn't understand. And as the game progresses, you're going to discover that that strange power has not only created all these hordes of monsters that you're encountering, but it's also the power that destroyed the world to begin with. And so when you defeat a boss in this game, like you get sort of like a shard of concentrated evil from those bosses, and it's basically your decision as to whether you want to fully embrace that evil and become hyper powerful and basically develop these really, really super cool powers and abilities that we've developed, or if you want to maintain your basic humanity, not go full evil, and try and fight your way through these caverns, basically with your main powers. And so our tagline for this is resist or embrace, and that choice is really central to the game itself. And we're looking at say multiple endings depending on how evil you get in the game.
So is there a benefit to being good in the game?
Basically, story-based, yes. I mean, we're looking to make sort of a tragedy that this lone, basically last survivor representation of what's left of humanity. If this character, you decide that you just want to reject what's left of humanity, we want it to feel like it's not a good thing. But gameplay-wise, we want it to make it super tempting and super cool to just go full evil. Like I've seen the powers that our team has developed, like the base powers, and then I've seen what they've designed for the corrupted abilities, and it's such a pleasing mechanic once you get corrupted, like, and you just sort of flow through the game with like feeling more powerful. So it's not like you're not going to have an easier time being good. And I think that might be sort of like a metaphor for life. It's a challenge to stay pure and good. It's not supposed to be easy. And I think that's where the main conflict of the game lies.
So it makes it more tempting to be evil.
Totally.
Man, that's some heavy stuff there, honestly. And you guys are still sticking with the same kind of art style that Jotun had as well.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So our
team is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay. Well, our team is super influenced by, say, the animation films that we watched over and over when we were kids, and especially just before CGI became the norm. Like there was like a spate of kind of dark animation films that went on through the 80s, especially with a director called Don Bluth. He had movies like The Land Before Time, The Secret of Nim. And if you go back and watch those movies, you can totally see like there's a direct correlation, like influence of his visual style with ours. And we wanted to keep on building on that with the same core team and the same expertise. We wanted that in Sundered as well.
But make it far more terrifying than those movies.
Yeah, well, basically. But again, I'd recommend that anybody listening go back and watch some of those movies. Like they hold up super well because it was the peak of hand-drawn animation before computers started really taking a lot of the hard work out of it. Like it becomes less of a each single frame has to be drawn sort of thing, and it became more of a, okay, how can I create a really, really stellar design and then have the computer animate on a skeleton, that sort of thing. Back then it was just one drawing again. And if you watch it, it's like, damn, it's really, really sort of like creepy. Sort of like back when you go into the old Disney movies, they had some creepiness, and then you go into the 80s and things started getting pretty dark in that animation. And it's surprising to watch today because today you get a lot of you try and make it bright and colorful and super accessible to as wide an audience as possible. And back in the 80s, they kind of tried to see, okay, can we make it a little more mature, like push that barrier a little? And you can tell like to impressionable kids like our art team back then, it really like kind of screws a little with your head.
It's so with Sundered, what would you feel like is because you said there's a lot of boss fights and stuff like that. Like, is it going to be similar to how like Rogue Legacy works? Like, if you die in the game, like you go back to the beginning, but like if you beat a boss, like that area is done and you can kind of go to the next part.
Yeah, well, exactly. So that's it. Well, that's where Rogue Legacy comes in. Like we found that game to be, super addictive. Like the replayability of that game is excellent. Like you can still go back to it years after, and you still get a kick out of it. So, in a similar fashion to that, in Sundered, basically dying is part of the game, right? You have a skill tree, you have a main hub that you go back to each time you die, and that you spend the say the currency that you've been picking up while fighting your way through the monsters. So if you don't die, you can't upgrade, right? You're not improving your character. And I suppose if you're that really, really top tier kind of gamer that you hardly ever die in games, you could do it that way. It's just going to become more and more challenging as you go on. But the main mechanic in Sundered is you're going to go up against, say, a boss or a horde of monsters that's really, really tough, and you're going to die. But when you die, you get stronger each time because you're upgrading your character each time before you go back into the map. And the other Rogue Legacy type thing that we're doing is that when you die, the map is procedurally regenerated around you, so it's randomized each time. You have those main boss rooms that are there, but the path to get to those rooms, the twisting caverns that you have to traverse, are always being randomized, as are the encounters in them. So it stays fresh each time. You're getting stronger and stronger each time, upgrading each of your abilities. So it makes for a mechanic that it's replayable up to a certain extent. Like I said, we have several endings which we're looking at as well. So not only does the core of the game change, but the ending of the game changes. So it's a little Rogue Legacy in that sense.
And so I guess to wrap everything up, when can we see Sundered coming out?
For the moment, we're saying 2017. We aren't getting any more specific than that at the moment. So anybody who's interested, I am going to be recommending that they sign up to our newsletter, because our newsletter is going to be the first outlet that's going to know when that date is specific for us.
And it says on your website too that if you sign up right now, you can actually win alpha access.
Absolutely. So sometime early next year, we're going to be opening up, we're going to have a closed alpha. So we're going to be inviting people to come and play the early version of the game and give us their comments, etc. And with the, say, thousands of people we already have on our mailing list, we can't give that to anybody. So it is going to be a drawing, but those are going to be, that's going to be the pool that we're picking from.
All right, so if you guys want a chance to try and win alpha access, just go on to thunderlotusgames.com and you can sign up to try to win an alpha access to Sundered. And Sundered is going to be coming out for Steam and PS4, so PC and PS4, because there's also the DR-free versions as well. And if you also want to check out Jotun, it's also on Steam, currently available, and on PS4, and I think Xbox One as well, or is it just PS4?
It's PS4, Xbox One, and Wii U.
And there you go, guys. So you have no reason not to check it out. And also, I have an extra key to Jotun, and I might give that away on my Twitter page. So if you don't follow me already, it's Digital Band Band. Is that cool if I do that, or am I going to get in trouble?
No, go right ahead and make sure that it's someone who actually wants to play the game.
I will.
Giveaways work that way. It's like, okay, I'm giving this away, and then you see it, you find it on G2A or something. But no, go right ahead, man.
Cool, awesome. Because I actually bought I have two collector's editions of this game now. I have the Indie Box one, and then I have the GameStop one that came out with the collection thing. So
nice.
Yeah, so I have an extra key. So if anyone wants to try out Jotun and they actually want to play it, you might get lucky here. Who knows? So, Rodrigue, thank you so much for coming onto the show and rescheduling. And hopefully we can do this again and closer to when Sundered comes out, or whenever the next game comes out. So, once again, I greatly appreciate it. And guys, go check out their games. They're awesome, and the art style is amazing. So, thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.